Ladies and gentlemen, this is Hollywood Joe from Hollywood's World of Sports, coming to you this evening with another edition of Hollywood's Hot Topics. It's been a while since I've been with you all, but tonight I want to talk to you about a really interesting topic that's been brought up over the last several days, and it has sparked a lot of discussion and a lot of debate, and I kind of want to dive into it a little bit more. So recently, I read a little blurb from Chris Jericho about how he wanted to go in front of the Olympic Committee and make professional wrestling an Olympic sport. And, a lot of people think he's crazy, and a lot of people think the idea is absurd. I think people are like, what is he thinking? And that would never work. But let's talk about this a little bit because it got me thinking about a lot of different things. Yes, professional wrestling is predetermined and it's choreographed and it is planned out. The matches are planned out. Um, and, it's not like it's people might not consider it a competitive sport. But here's the thing. Let's think about this. Figure skating. Yes, it's competitive, but it's also choreographed. They have to rehearse their moves. They have to rehearse their, you know, um, different techniques and, stuff like that. The same can be said with gymnastics. There is a lot of rehearsal. Um, there's dance involved with gymnastics to a certain degree, and that has to be choreographed and has to be practiced and has to be rehearsed. And it's like any sport, really. Every sport requires a lot of practice. But you know what? So does pro wrestling. And now people are finding it absurd that Jericho compared pro wrestling to figure skating and maybe even gymnastics, but really he's not far off. Um, you have to rehearse these things, you have to choreograph these things, you have to plan them, you have to practice them. Now, in pro wrestling, I understand that the results are predetermined. So, how would you let's just hypothetically say for a minute, how would you judge professional wrestling in the Olympic setting? Well, there's a few different ways. One, you could judge it based off, how well the match went from a choreographed point. Was there any mess ups? Was there any flaws? Was there any mistakes during the match or botches, as us pro wrestling fans like to call them? You could base it off the storytelling and psychology. Did the match make sense? Like us 80s and 90s pro wrestling fans, did they work a body part? Like a lot of the old school wrestling, focused on working on a specific part of the body, and the wrestler that was being hurt would sell it and make you think that that part of the body was actually hurt. Um, so those are two different ways that you could judge it: is technique, psychology. Like in pro wrestling, the fans are very much a key factor on if a match is great or it's bad. So you could even, if it was in front of an audience of a large group of people, you could base it off fan reaction. How good was the fan reaction and how much were they into the match? That's a possibility. So I mean, yes, it seems weird And some people say, well, pro wrestling being part of the Olympics would expose the business. Like, I mean, come on. The business has been being exposed for the last 40 something years, ever since, the introduction of cable television and even into the internet age. It's already exposed. I mean, come on, kayfabe, um, the realism that people thought that was behind it, it's gone. So let's just not get all uptight about it and say that it's going to expose the business, because let me tell you, the business has been exposed. Everybody knows what it is. Everybody takes it for what it is. Um, Really, at this point in the industry's history, you can't expose it any more than it already is. So people need to get that whole idea and notion out of their head. I mean, I think it's kind of cool that Chris Jericho even brought it up and even made it an idea, because trust me, there are some sports in the Olympics that are head scratchers to me. Um, like I like the horse dancing. I remember like the last Olympics, it was I forget if it was summer or winter, they had horse dancing. I don't even know if that's the real name of the sport, but it was these jockeys getting their horses to dance or prance or whatever the hell they were doing. And it drove me nuts. And it was a bit of a head scratcher. So, I mean, if horse dancing can be an Olympic sport, why not pro wrestling? And no disrespect to all you horse dancers and jockeys out there. I just don't get it. But pro wrestling takes a lot of athletic ability. It takes a lot of strength for some wrestlers. It takes a lot of acrobatic abilities for other wrestlers. I personally would love to see the matches and competitions of putting on a match be broken down into weight classes. And the reason I say that is a heavyweight match is going to flow a lot differently than a cruiserweight match. It's just a fact of life. I mean, cruiserweights, dating all the way back to when I watched in WCW, the cruiserweights and the light heavyweights of the world do incredible, incredible things. There are things that they can do that I can't even wrap my head around of how I would even do it. So it would be cool to see like a cruiserweight division, a middleweight division, or a light heavyweight division, somewhere around there, and then like a heavyweight slash super heavyweight division. Because again, there's going to be different styles and the matches are going to flow differently. And this is all hypothetical. Obviously, like Chris Jericho bringing up the idea, we're a very, very, very long way off from that ever even happening. But I think he's onto something. Um, I feel like professional wrestlers do not get the credit they deserve for being extremely athletic, for being extremely strong in some cases, and for doing things with their body, honestly, that um, almost sometimes seem like impossible. There's this things I've seen wrestlers go through that absolutely seem impossible. And so I really don't think Chris Jericho's that crazy. I don't think he's losing his mind. I don't think it's a horrible idea. I honestly think it's a great idea to showcase what pro wrestlers can do on a national scene. And that's another aspect of it. Think about, let's think about like them representing their country. I mean, there's wrestlers all over this world, and like for example, like Switzerland. there's only one Swiss wrestler that we know of, like on a national basis, and that's Claudio Castagnoli, formerly known as Cesaro. Could you imagine if Claudio was in the Olympics and he put together a match with another wrestler from Switzerland that maybe we've never heard of? And he helps put that pro wrestler on the map because they competed in the Olympics. It's the same thing with Walter, aka Gunther, who's in the WWE. He is from Austria. Imagine if he and another Austrian wrestler that people might not know of got together and delivered an amazing professional wrestling match and story, and that helped elevate that wrestler's career. So there are a lot of benefits to it, actually. I mean, think about some of the countries who don't have professional wrestlers on national television and how that would benefit the independent scene, and it would benefit companies like WWE and AEW getting into those television markets. So really, professional wrestling in the Olympics, as crazy as it may sound, as far-fetched it may sound, as, people might disagree with it, I do, like I said, I do think Chris Jericho is onto something. And I love the fact that he brought this up, and I love the fact it's given people a lot to talk about. There's been a lot of discussion about it. There's been a lot of debating about it. Some people love the idea, others hate the idea. I think it's awesome. And so kudos to Chris Jericho for bringing it into the spotlight as something to talk about. I personally I'm on board with it. I would love to see it happen. So we'll see. Obviously, we're not even close to coming to that point of it ever happening. But for now, it's a fun thing to talk about, and I would absolutely love to hear people's opinions about professional wrestling being a part of the Olympics. So, with that being said, this has been Hollywood Joe from Hollywood's World of Sports. Be sure to check me out on all my social media, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all the good stuff out there. So, hope you all have a wonderful and happy Thanksgiving. Remember, as always, controversy doesn't come without criticism.